Hello there. The good old Zero Mick and Ron. Think about it. Zero Mick and Ron may be about to consign the global response to the you-know-what into the dustbin of history. Unless, of course, vested interests get in the way. Now I know it's too early to really tell, but there may be some very good emerging news for everyone. And once again I have to be very careful how I frame this. But there is a serious debate to be had here, a debate that the mechanics of social media will not yet be set up to allow, if ever. But I believe it is a debate that has to take place now, not after the interminable waiting to see if certain people have made enough dosh out of the current situation yet. So here goes. If doctors in Oslo are to be believed, the mild-mannered South African brothers Zero, Mick and Ron could give us all a kiss and in turn give the herd a bit of a strengthening, thus rendering the do as you're told or you are out of society policies sweeping the globe utterly pointless. In fact, worse than pointless, those totalitarian policies would become totally self-damaging on financial, social and societal levels. The thing is that according to reports, Zero, Mick and Ron are extremely fleet of foot, may well replace their predecessor and can get around and meet people very quickly. But when they do, say the Norwegian experts, the worst most will get is a bit of a hangover after the party. And even Theresa May has stood up in the House of Commons and said it's time to get on with life. This being the case, surely we should all look ahead with a renewed optimism. And surely the government is working speedily on a 0-yard plan instead of a 2-yard plan. So I'm sure that the government and other vested interests will raise a glass with us and cheer the good news. That's right, our leaders, science bods, celebrities and our media will all be telling us that if the reports are true, we should soon be returning to a pre-2020 normal. Nothing new now being needed. And they will tell us that the most vulnerable have been protected and it's now time to reverse the plan, won't they? Governments across the planet will release us from all restrictions and we will have the best Christmas celebrations in history, won't we? Our children could rush back to school and breathe freely once again, and this time in warm classrooms. Given the chance and a bit of time and investment, our children might then be able to bridge the yawning learning gap that Ofsted tells us now exists. We could apologise to the 60,000 sacked care home workers and get them back to doing what they love, caring for their charges. We could also ditch the plan to enforce those rules on NHS staff. And importantly, we can quickly get on with a full inquiry into this whole period in our history and chase up where all that money was spent and in whose pockets it's ended up. But were such a scenario to quickly unfold, share prices in certain companies could plummet, leaving some investors in the lurch. We could also end up with untold tons of associated paraphernalia tied up in warehouses and unable to be shifted, causing a certain vested interest gravy train to come to a shuddering halt. A gravy train surrounded and guarded by a horde of psychological nudge experts, a compliant press and willing social media big tech companies. Which, if there is encouraging news out there, points to the biggest hurdle the government will have, which is the hurdle of how do we unafraid the public? Will it be easy to reverse what they've done? And do they really want to reverse it? Maybe they'd rather keep us on the edge. And then there's the media. Remove all of this, and what will the press have left to hang their clickbait on? back to Brexit-driven HGV driver petrol and turkey shortages, as well as all those empty shelves. Really? Looking at things right now, those would be very hard stories to sell. And many people I've alluded to will not want to see questions being asked about any of this. If the South African expert who said that Zero, Mick and Ron could follow the Spanish route and signal the end to our problems is right, then surely Australia needs to shut its holiday camps down, Greece needs to re-evaluate its plans for the over 60s, Austria needs to think again over its nationwide scheme, and France should stop its show me your papers policies. And Ursula von der Leyen may need to drop her thoughts about leading the conversation on any EU-wide compulsory programme, although I gather the polls are saying they'll have nothing to do with that particular exercise. And if Zero, Mick and Ron were the shady characters that some want them to be seen as, then I'm sure it would have been plastered across every media outlet worldwide and in gory, graphic detail by now. But nothing yet. But I also hear no talk of hope from any government or press outlet. It's almost as if they are waiting and hoping against hope for more bad news to follow. More bad news that they can swoop on and screech about. More clickbait. More bad news they can send us all to Coventry for. More bad news to put children back in icy detention for. More bad news to allow them to continue to reshape our new normal society. It will be interesting to see how the authorities end up dealing with Zero, Mick and Ron. Because every day they keep obstructing their progress, governments could be delaying our return to normality. What we need to hear now is that the government has learned the lessons from the previous easing of restrictions that caused a supply chain demand overload. Because if these green shoots of optimism regarding Zero, Mick and Ron are correct, then we need to be ready to launch this country back into full industrial and economic activity, not stumble through more self-defeating crises. And if the government does keep obstructing Zero, Mick and Ron, even in the face of possibly almost benign outcomes, then we will know the direction in which they wish to take us. And it won't be in the direction of the herd, but in the direction of the vested interests. This debate needs to start now. This is not just for the experts either. We all need to be able to talk about this openly and robustly. The stakes are too high for anything else. But those sorts of discussions and debates would inevitably stray into the dark corners of happenings over the last 18 months or so, and there are some who will definitely not welcome that. Now, if anything demonstrates that a massive Whitehall overhaul is needed, then this is probably it. But before I get onto that, I just want to say a massive thank you to all my Super Thanks Patreon and PayPal supporters, as well as those that do buy a mug with my mug on it. Links in the descriptions box below. You really do help me keep this channel going. So, a civil service whistleblower has gone public and laid out the deficiencies of Whitehall in gruesome detail, leaving the former Foreign Secretary and now Justice Secretary Dominic Raab fighting a massive rearguard action. The Daily Mail reports that Tories turned on Dominic Raab today as he dismissed damning evidence from a whistleblower about the Afghanistan debacle. The former Foreign Secretary batted away a fresh wave of anger over the shambles after a junior civil servant claimed that at times they had been the only person dealing with thousands of emails from those desperate to flee the Taliban. Raphael Marshall said soldiers had to be drafted in for desk work in the Foreign Office when officials stayed at home and refused to do overtime. Ye gods! If this is only partly true, then heads must roll. And the thought of having to draft already hard-pressed troops into Whitehall offices to do the work that could be done by civil servants beggars belief. Now, the House of Commons Library says that as of the 1st of November this year, there were 159,000 full-time trained and untrained service personnel across all three services. Many of those are deployed abroad and many work long hours that civilians would not undertake. And according to the Institute for Government, as of June this year, there were over 465,000 full-time equivalent civil servants. An increase of 11,530 or 2.5% on the quarter. Yes, that's right. The civil service had expanded by 11,350 people or 2.5% in the 3 months of April, May and June. Must be all those diversity and inclusion officers. Now every time there's an emergency, a storm, a health event, a strike that affects the emergency services or a flood or whatever, the troops are called in to fill the sandbags or drive the trucks. Or fill the forms in, even if they're just about to be sent home on well-earned leave. And that's because they are tasked to provide aid to the civil powers in times of emergency. And if these claims are true, this time the troops had to do overtime because the civil servants didn't want to, during a time of national need. Obviously had an appointment with Netflix or something. But if you want to use troops at every drop of every hat, then you need the boots available to get on the ground to help in the first place. How can a country with its largest ever population field an armed service that is almost at its smallest number ever? All those record numbers of people supposedly enjoying the highest ever employment rate, paying all that tax, but not enough tax for some real troop numbers. And right at a time when we have Putin's Russia massing troops on the border with Ukraine and China advancing its envelope of influence by building sea forts and eyeing up a crack at Taiwan. But at least we in the UK have our pronouns in order. And our civil servants happily working from home, maintaining their work-life balances, while troops have to fill the gaps. Again. So what's your opinion on getting back to normal quickly and our civil servants? Please like and comment below. Please subscribe and like this video, buy a mug and support me on Patreon or PayPal, and thank you for watching.